Good morning, STrEAM Academy. Good morning, everyone. We are live on YouTube. We're live on Zoom. We are ready to kick off morning coffee today. Welcome, everybody. Anchored STREAM Academy empowers students to be involved learners, critical thinkers, and engaged citizens who are inspired the natural world. That's our mission and we love it. Good morning, Mrs. Beyondich. Are you ready to co-host and kick this thing off, get this party started with a strong cup of coffee this morning?
I am so excited, and I have my cup of coffee in my beautiful STrEAM mug.
That's a beautiful mug, Mrs. Beyondich. Your mic doesn't say you're muted, but I can't hear you. Tell us about that mug you've got in your hand.
This mug is available through our 501c3. It is only $20, and I only have about 15 mugs left. So if you're interested in this mug, make sure that you call the school or visit the 501c3 website, which is linked to the STREAM Academy website, and place your order, and we will get one delivered to you.
Awesome. That is a pretty incredible mug. I've got one of those mugs myself. I'm not using it today. I'm sorry. Grabbed the wrong mug this morning. We've got staff with us today. Ms. Kotelman's here. Mr. Mosen's here. Good morning, Coach. Mr. Holsopple and Mr. Beer are here, of course. They are our presenters today. Their cohort is on the hook for telling us all the good things that are happening out there. We've got some of our APC members on Zoom with us this morning. Gail Yip, good morning, Gail, in her art studio. And we've got Jen Mickelson with us. Good morning, Jen. Our counselor, Ms. Bonertz, is here. See, we've also got some parents and family members who are on. What's on the agenda today, Mrs. Beyondich? What do we have? What do we have happening on Morning Coffee?
We're gonna quickly review our upcoming events. We have a STREAM 501c3 update. We have our Q4 plans and options. We want to also remind people that we have an academic policy committee meeting tonight. We have 2 people signed up for public testimony. If you're interested in 3 minutes of public testimony, you just have to call me at 742-9000 and get on the agenda, and I'll be happy to send you the link to the Zoom APC meeting. And then we have a great cohort update from Mr. Holsopple and Mr. Beer. And then we get to hear a few words from Ms. Bonertz and a few words from Ms. Kotelman, who's our grading guru.
That sounds like a pretty incredible morning coffee lineup to me. It sounds like a great show. We have a great show here for you today. Upcoming dates to remember, Mrs. Beyondich just said it. We have an APC meeting tonight. The APC is the Academic Policy Committee. That's the Anchorage School District's fancy language for saying the school board that oversees a charter school, not the school board of the whole district. That's our board. I call them our board. And that meeting is at 5:30 p.m. It's an important meeting. We have a couple people signed up for public testimony at that meeting. And at that meeting tonight, I will present our APC with our plan for the Q4. It follows fairly closely with what ASD secondary schools are doing, but as is the nature of charter schools, we have some things specific to our program and what our staff are planning to do that we'll ask the APC to review and approve. But right now, today for morning coffee, as you said, Mrs. Beyondich, we have our cohort presentation, and a little bonus on our cohort presentation. Mr. Holsopple is a resident scientific brain and expert on things and lots of knowledge in the healthcare field, and is going to talk a little bit about the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccines that are out there, and just share some information, some knowledge that he has for us. He did this for us at a staff meeting, and actually, for our staff, that's pretty obviously really well educated and up on things, and knew quite a bit about the vaccine. It's still, what I heard from our staff was really, really informative and worthwhile. They learned a lot. our staff in general said if they had doubts about the vaccine, just concerns prior to Mr. Holsoppel's presentation, that they felt much, much better about it. So he will share some of that info with you as well. Next week, I'm super excited about this. We have Dr. Holly Geis coming back to the program for the second time. We're a big fan of Dr. Geis and her work at STrEAM Academy. She is a PhD, I believe from Yale, correct? I'd have to look at her bio again. She's a PhD. She's currently a college professor. She's an expert in Alaska Native studies, culture, and history. And remember last fall, she presented to us at a really opportune time. She presented to us in November around Veterans Day on her work on Alaska Native interaction with and involvement with World War II and during World War II, and some really, really interesting things there. This time around, she's also done scholarly work on Elizabeth Pratovich, who is a very well-known Alaskan pioneer of civil rights, and was instrumental in passing the Alaska Equal Rights Act in 1945. So she has a essay in the book Suffrage at 100 that we have in our library, and I just reread that the other day. It's excellent work, an essay on Elizabeth Pratovich, and she will be here on Wednesday to talk about Elizabeth Pratovich and her life and her history and her work, which is fitting because Tuesday, February 16th is Elizabeth Pratovich Day in Alaska. That's the connection. We have awesome outdoor ed focused, another outdoor education focused, working with our friends at Anchorage Parks coming up on the 24th. And then the last morning coffee of the quarter I believe is that day. It's on the 24th. Or is it? Nope, sorry. It would be the 3rd. I don't have it on this slide. I believe it'd be the 3rd of March will be the last morning coffee of the quarter. So before we move to Mr. Holsoppel and Mr. Mosen, each week I promised our parents, each week we would touch base on what's happening second semester and fourth quarter, what our plans are as that has evolved and changed over time. So we are in small group in-person learning labs. We've had, on average, I'd say about 10 students per day. We allowed students to sign up 1 day per week for a learning lab, and that has gone really well. We have had this very small, safe way to practice reintegration into the building, to practice our COVID protocols, to actually experience having students in the building and in the classroom, what that looks like, how they come in, how we take them out on breaks, when and where they eat, for example, how much policing of masks we have to do, our cleaning procedures. And so we've been able to practice and prepare all of these things with a small number of students and staff. Most of our staff are coming in voluntarily 1 day per week to host a learning lab. And so we spread these 10 students out. They are only 2 or 3 students in each room. And it also has allowed our staff, again, in a small number, very safe way, allowed our staff to start to experience having students in the room with them again. Of course, that is a big challenge for our staff because they're still teaching class on Zoom with all of their students. So they can't really teach and monitor the students that are there in person while doing that. Their primary job right now still is to teach classes on Zoom. So I'm trying to provide a lot of support, as is Ms. Beyondich, as is Ms. Bonertz, and just to help that all happen. It's gone really well. So we will continue that until the end of the quarter. The last day of the quarter is the 3rd, Friday the 3rd of March. There's no school that day. That's a grading day. Our staff will be in the building working on finishing up grades and their last chance to prepare for being back full-time fourth quarter. Spring break, of course, goes through the 12th. Well, really the 14th, because Monday the 15th, we are back. School is in session. So this is not 100% final yet because our APC will vote on this tonight. Here's what I have proposed to our APC, that all of our staff will be back in the building on Monday, the 15th of March. And that week, they will teach their classes on Zoom. And they will do a lot of preparation for return to in-person. The week of March 15th, classes will be on Zoom. Students will still be home. There'll be no learning labs. There'll be no students in the building, just teachers in the building teaching their classes. The following week, after that week of reintegration for our staff and our staff being in the building together full time and being able to prepare for students coming back, the following week, Monday, March 22nd, we will begin full in-person learning. All of our students will be able to come back. That'll be 4 days a week. Remember, at the December 9th APC meeting, our APC already voted and approved, unanimously approved, to remain, to keep Wednesday as a working Wednesday, as a virtual working Wednesday for the remainder of the school year. And so that's our plan still going forward. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, students will be in the building in person for their classes. However, and here's the really important piece that we're working on really hard right now. As we have said and promised from the beginning of the year, your students do not have to return in person if you're not ready and until you're ready. So you can, the thing I need parents to hear is you can keep your children home and keep them enrolled in their STrEAM classes with their STrEAM teachers. So if they were slated to have Miss Kodelman for language arts and Miss Gable for social studies fourth quarter, they would still have those classes with those teachers. Our teachers are committed to continue to post all of their assignments and their assessments and their lessons on Canvas. We're going to continue to do that throughout the rest of the year. It's a lot of work for our teachers, so please remember when you're thinking about our staff, remember that they're putting in a ton of work to make all this work. They work so hard, and I think harder now than they've ever had to because of the conditions. So they will continue, although they're teaching face-to-face in person, and that'll be their primary focus. They'll continue to put everything on Canvas. And so those students who are staying home will be able to get on every day, access those lessons, access those assignments, access their assessments. They'll be able to continue working on their classes until you're ready for them to come back. And that may not be till the end of the year, or it may be that after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you feel like you're ready. You've seen that things have gone really well at STrEAM. There are more vaccinations, so on and so forth. Community spread is down, whatever it may be. Because they'll stay in the classes they're scheduled in, they're able to reintegrate to in-person learning anytime. So that is what we're now calling STrEAM Hybrid. That's our hybrid program. Because they're working at home, taking STrEAM classes, they're allowed to reintegrate into in-person learning when they're ready. Your other two options, nobody has selected at STrEAM yet this year. I don't believe anyone will. One option is to go with ASD virtual. To stay virtual, you don't lose your spot at STrEAM. You technically stay enrolled in STrEAM. You do virtual classes with an ASD teacher through the district separate from us. Nobody's chosen that yet this year. I don't expect anyone to choose that now, but it's an option. And if somebody does, for some reason, want to consider that, we would absolutely support you and work with you. And then the other option the district's offering now is ASD homeschool, to switch to homeschool through the district, through Paideia. And again, I think anyone who is going to choose homeschool this year at STrEAM has already, and they've chosen their, the homeschool programs that they're of their choice. So that's our plan for fourth quarter. Teachers are teaching in the building starting on March 15th. Students will return March 22nd. Wednesdays will remain virtual working Wednesdays. We'll provide Zoom sessions on Wednesdays for those students who are virtual and the ones who are in person. And you can keep your students home. Just let us know. 75 people responded to the ASD survey telling us what they wanted to do. And I reached out yesterday to every family that selected hybrid, staying at home. And so some of you have a voicemail from me, hopefully. Some of you I spoke to. Right now, we're looking at about 10 students that are choosing hybrid, choosing to stay home to start the quarter. But we only had half of our families respond to the survey. So we will be reaching out and calling the remaining 80 some students' families. Mrs. Beyondich and I and a couple other of our staff divvied those up, and we're going to be making those calls tomorrow and Friday. If you want to be proactive and you're listening to this, call us, let us know what you want to do. It could be a really short conversation. You can say, hey, I didn't do the survey, but I'm staying in person, or I'm returning in person. We're returning in person. That's an easy one. What I really need to know is who the students are that are going to go hybrid and stay virtual. So that's a lot of me talking, and I try to break it up on morning coffee and not have to talk all that much. So I will finish there. We can come back around to questions after the presentations. And mostly we just want you to call, email, reach out to us, let us know what you want to do. We'll support you like we always have. All right, Mrs. Beyondich, before we move on, is there anything else I should say or share about that?
No, I think you did a very thorough job. Renee did have a question in the chat box about if a student was going to be traveling, could they Zoom in? So they can't actually Zoom into live instruction Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. They can Zoom in on Wednesdays, but there's no live instruction going to be Zoomed. So that asynchronous learning will look a little bit different, and we'll reach out to the families that request that.
Yes, thank you. I suppose if a teacher chose to turn their camera on and let the Zoom roll because they had a bunch of students who are virtual, we wouldn't prevent that. But we're not asking teachers to do that, and probably our staff won't because it's a lot to ask to manage a Zoom and in person. But I think what'll happen is teachers will figure out what works best as they get started with in-person instruction, and they'll adjust and they'll do what's working. But Renee, all of his assignments and his assessments will be available on Canvas. He won't be able to Zoom into class, but he will be able to log into Canvas and get his work and follow up that way.
And they'll log in on Wednesdays because we'll have
yes.
virtual classes on Wednesdays.
Yep, absolutely. I do want to impress that this is a lot of work for our staff. They're planning for in-person instruction. They're planning for kids in their classrooms every day, which is a lot of work. To teach kids is hard work, and it's not rocket science. It's more complicated than that. And in addition to that, they'll still be providing online lessons and instruction and putting everything on Canvas. So it's in some ways it's doubling up the workload. And I guess my reason for pointing that out is, I know there's a little bit of a narrative out there sometimes that teachers aren't working as much while we're virtual and teaching, remotely. And as your principal with over 20 years of experience and education, someone who knows teachers and teaching pretty well, stays very close contact and, keeps his finger on the pulse, our teachers are working really, really, really hard. My concern, honestly, as a principal, is not that somebody's not putting in work and the time. My concern has been that our staff is putting in more time and more work than they ever have. My concern is that our teachers are burning the candle at both ends to make virtual learning awesome, to make it great, and to keep up with everything and the learning curve, all of the new things, all of the tools, all of the technology, all of the demands on their time. So just know that, and feel free, if you hear that narrative out there, to respond back to that and say, actually, that's not true. The teachers are working harder than ever because they are. And yeah, we should be thankful for the staff that we have. We really should. All right. Speaking of the staff that we have a couple of outstanding educators teaching 7th grade math and science, doing great things for kids. Mr. Holsopple and Mr. Beard are our 7th grade math and science teachers, and I'm going to turn it over to them. Good morning, Mr. Beard. Good morning, Mr. H. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Tell us what's happening in 7th grade math and science.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McKelkey. Appreciate the accolades per usual. And looks like host has disabled screen sharing. I apologize about that. But if I could start off with our class, myself and Mr. Holsopple, we co-teach our Mission class, but I focus mainly on the direct math class. So our slideshow here that we created is going to kind of go through our different classes. First, I'll start with math. Then I'm going to talk about our Mission class and what we're working on in our project class. So we affectionately call it Mission, as it's a combination of our mission and vision. Then Mr. Holsopple will take over. He'll talk a little bit about his science class that he's working with the students and all those interesting things that they're doing in science. And then also Mr. Holsopple has the extra bonus, a little bit of information that was really well thought out and well planned about the vaccine that has come out for the coronavirus that we have all heard about. All right. So first off, I am teaching dual class Math 7 and pre-algebra for period 1. Right now we're working on statistics and probability information. Kind of typical mean, median, mode stuff, but we also worked on experimental and theoretical probability, where we took students, were using online dice rolls to compare what the theoretical probability is to then simulate those probabilities and then find the experimental probability. And as we did more and more rolls, we saw that the experimental probability tends towards theoretical probability, which was pretty neat. And then we're working a little bit on population and sample now after our independent and dependent events. In algebra, we're mainly working on linear equations and inequalities right now, just kind of solidifying those notions, especially graphing, which is kind of tough to do virtually, I have found out. It's not really super easy. A lot of us are not very good at drawing graphs with our mouse, which myself included. So I do encourage students to create these graphs at home. We do have graph paper if needed, but to find a straight edge using a pencil, just kind of get those fine motor skills in tune for whenever we come back in to virtual learning as well. And then another thing I like to focus on is manipulating the equations. This really encourages a lot of critical thinking and problem solving. So we start with an equation that's just kind of jumbled up, and we're able to reorder it into a manner where it looks a lot more easable and usable. Awesome. But our main focus that we really try asynchronously to focus on with the students is going to be our ALEX and our iReady software. So this is really important for students because whenever we think about percentage of time in class, I have students for about 90 minutes, 4 days a week, which is not really a lot of time. While I do the direct instruction and we try to use that time as efficiently as possible, that's not even close to the amount of time I usually have students in class, especially talking about a quarter being a full semester. So it is important for students to do a lot of asynchronous stuff on ALEX and iReady. So ALEX is our adaptive online curriculum software. What it does is it'll take topics that students are completing, and whenever they complete a certain topic, it'll create their next topic or start to curate a path for them to allow them to finish through that curriculum. What it does is it really gives students that opportunity to kind of move through the curriculum at their own pace, but most importantly, it gives students a pathway to move through the curriculum a lot faster than what I'm able to do with our time restrictions of direct instruction. And also with our asynchronous classes, even on Canvas that we're building. So the other thing to remember too, that I remind students a lot, whenever they're taking the knowledge check, this is kind of like a mastery assignment whenever we are working in class, in that anytime you complete or show that you know stuff in the knowledge check, what it does is it changes from learned to mastered. It changes from learned to mastered. So if I could take a little bit of time here, this would be what students see whenever they are looking at the ALEX page here. And this is the pie that we see most prominently. And then they're able to see kind of a percentage or number of topics. So as you can see up here in the top right, we have 283 mastered topics. What that means is I essentially just took a knowledge check. So I was able to convert my learned topics to mastered topics. So learned topics, I was able to complete the topic that was up next, where mastered means that I took a knowledge check and I showed that I was able to complete that topic. One of the important things for parents whenever they're asking students to log into ALEX to remember is that we have the pie, but we also have this timeline. Which is a very useful tool to kind of check on things because it'll show practice assignments or maybe a mastery assignment that has been assigned. And then also what it'll do is show students who have logged in and then how much time they have logged in and then also what they have done during their time. So as you can see, I have been logged in today, but I haven't done anything. I just have time in the time in there. So I have a couple situations here. I was logged in, but I didn't do anything. I didn't learn any topics. There was a time goal that we have every Friday and Tuesday that I give students in class where I'll work one-on-one with students to try to give them a little bit more edge to get through that. So then you can see a complete month. Or if you want to see all, this would be kind of our full year here starting at the beginning of the year. So as you can see, as a student myself, I haven't really used the student view too much except for over here. So I've done a lot this semester kind of showing students what to do on the student view and all of that. Cool. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time to show that aspect. And then anytime students have anything or you want to say how well are you doing, you can also click over onto the menu, which is in the top left here, sometimes affectionately known as hamburger. Because it kind of looks like a hamburger with the buns and the burger in the middle. And then you can click on reports for the student. And this will be all different reports. They have like this week's activity, how much time they spent, topics learned, topics attempted but not learned, which is an important one as well. The full pie that they're working on. And then this will give you specific topics, something that maybe needs a little bit more practice. And then you're able to click on those topics and it'll give you some examples. You can kind of work through those work with them through that. Or you could have them say, hey, check in with Mr. B at 8 a.m. Between that 8 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. Time on Zoom, and he can kind of work with you on those topics. Sweet. So ALEX is a really good program. I really think that it's very profound and that it's able to, or robust rather, be a better word, and it's able to get students through the curriculum. However, we do have another asynchronous software through the district that really helps students complete skills that they may have lost during that time without direct instruction, which is iReady. So we do have an expectation about 50 minutes on both math and reading within iReady. And the nice thing about iReady is they do have lessons that have kind of animations and videos attached to them, and they work through those lessons. While some students do find it a little bit cumbersome that they have to watch the whole video, they can't just skip through. It is important for them to kind of slow down sometimes and kind of retain the information and stuff like that. So it is important for us to complete our iReady every week for math and then also for reading. And one of the things that we talked about asynchronously is that there is a lot of time between quarters. So those quarters, as we think about how much time is between quarter 2 and quarter 4, there are 12 total weeks. So 2 weeks for winter break, 9 weeks for quarter 3, and then a week for spring break. So it's really important for us to keep up with those skills asynchronously so we can be successful in Q4. All right. So our mission class, which is our project class, myself and Mr. Holsopper are working with students. What we're doing is we're developing a science fiction short story with the students. So at the beginning of the quarter, students selected a topic to write about. And then also what we did is took a little bit of time to research that topic. During this research time, students found some real life facts, and they took those facts and we built a fictional world around it to allow the students to kind of create a short story, build characters. And then our end goal that we started this week is students started to create a Google site. And what they'll do is be able to present these short stories, hopefully with some extra added things to our short story that are a little bit more above and beyond. But what we're expecting is that the students will have this short story presented on their site, and we'll be able to present that as a public product at a literary exposition is what I came up with, the term I came up with. So it should be a lot of fun. The students are having a really great time with it. And as you will know from Mr. H, I'm sure he'll agree with me. When we talk about these short stories, it's so awesome to see the students' creativity with myself and Mr. H, who tend to teach a little bit more drier type situations from time to time. So it's nice to get a little bit of creativity, a little bit of arts and research applied into our classes for sure. Cool. So that being said, I really appreciate all of the time you've given me here, but Mr. H will take over from here and talk about science class.
Thanks, Mr. B. I'm going to stop your screen sharing and share my screen, which looks surprisingly similar to yours. It's amazing how we're on the same wavelength all the time here. And I really appreciate that we are, because it makes our jobs so much easier. Anyway, I am a science teacher, self-professed nerd, all things science related. So what have we been doing in science? Well, we started out with a unit on an introduction to physics. So the Q3, or really second semester of 7th grade science, is devoted to physics. And physics is, well, if you think about science, you think about life science as being this big macro thing, and then you think about chemistry as being these on a lab bench, and then you get even smaller and you talk about these chemical interactions, and that's physics, and that's where we get math. And so I love being able to teach with Mr. B because there's such a natural tie-in between the physics, which is science, and the explanation of physics, which is math. And so what we've been doing is physics. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click on that link yet. We've been introing energy, the forms of energy, and then talking about gravity, friction, Newton's laws of motion. And then students did a project called Setting an Object in Motion. And what they did was that they took what they learned about gravity and friction and Newton's laws of motion, of which there are 3 that are super important, and they put it into a brochure. Now I'm old school. I like physical, tangible things. So a brochure that you could like pick up and fold and turn upside down if you wanted to. That really appeals to me. So I kind of forced that on students. I gave them this template, and they had to fill in these boxes based on what they learned. So in their own words, they had to describe Newton's laws of motion and how it applies to setting their object in motion. And then they had to find or create a diagram that explained that. So there's some writing, some illustrating, some art, and it looks a little out of place because this is meant to be printed out and then folded into that tri-fold brochure. So it looks a little funny on the computer that the title is way over here on the right, but this is what they did. And then I scaffolded that for students by giving them links where they had already answered these questions. So all of these blue links were, hey, you've actually explained Newton's second law right here on this assignment. If you need to go back, there it is, you've done it. And to set their object in motion, describe how that applies. Well, there's this assignment that you actually explain that. And so this was really a culminating mastery project because they're pulling information from all of these things that they've already done, and they're presenting it in this kind of unified structure that sort of encompasses everything that they've learned. And so the students were pretty successful at doing that because of that step-by-step kind of piece. Our second topic was waves, and we just finished waves. And I'm not talking about the wave at a stadium. I'm not talking about high wave. I'm talking about physics and the fun that waves have. So we talked about characteristics of waves like amplitude and frequency and wavelength. We're nerding out on the waves here. So we measured some waves, measured the frequency, measured the amplitude, measured the wavelength. And then we talked about sound waves and EM radiation, which is part of the EM spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum. And we did some online labs. You can't do science without some labs and simulations. So there are online labs by the University of Colorado that enable students to really play with and see and visualize sound waves and light waves. And it was a really great way to get students involved in visualizing some of these things that are sort of abstract, and they can't really see a light wave, they can't really see a sound wave, they can hear it, but so did some of those things. And then we did a project on waves, and students had an opportunity to choose several different things. So they had 4 choices of ways to demonstrate that they really understood waves. And so I gave them 4 choices. Basically, this is junk drawer science. They go around their house, they find things. For example, this is one of the 4 choices. They basically built an air horn, which I've been told drives dogs nuts because it's high-pitched and squeaky. I've also heard that it really drives siblings nuts too, but I think that's a story for another time. Anyway, they get the procedure. They get to build this thing, this air horn from scratch, and then they get to play it. And then they videotape themselves to get credit for these assignments. This is their mastery assignment. They actually create a video of them using their device and explaining the science behind it, the physics behind it. And it's so cool to hear and see the excitement on these students' faces that, hey, I actually built this. I did it. I did it by myself, and I built it. And I can explain the science. And so that really comes through in those videos. And I love watching them because they get really into it. It's really cool, really cool. All right, so that was our second unit. Right now we're in our third unit out of 4, and that is our heat and light. So we're sort of moving through the electromagnetic spectrum of waves. So we talked about thermal or infrared energy. We're right now talking about visible light and matter. We're doing some online labs and simulations. We're playing with lasers, and we're playing with light, and we're playing with prisms, and we're separating out light. Everything that we would have done in person, they're doing online in these simulations. So it's not quite as cool as being able to shine a laser through a prism, but it's the next best thing in this time. And now we're going to get to do a project. And there are 6 different options that students can use to demonstrate their mastery of light and its properties of waves. So here is one, what students are going to introduce, and this is going to be on Friday. So this is a sneak peek to yourself. All right, students don't know this yet, but there are 6 options. This is one of them. And basically they just find flashlights and they color them red and green and blue, and they see what happens. So they go into a dark closet and they shine these lights, and they see what happens when they shine those lights onto different objects, and they see what colors they can create. And what they will again do is they'll create a video of themselves using those flashlights in different combinations, and they'll have to explain the physics behind it. And so while I'm not excited about seeing the inside of some of my students' closets, that's sort of scary to me, I am excited about seeing their videos and their explanations of waves, light waves in particular. Cool. What we are going to do after that is electricity and magnetism. So we'll talk about electric charge and force, electric fields. We'll talk about AC/DC currents, electric currents, circuits, magnetism, and electromagnetism. We'll do some online labs and simulations, and then we'll end with our projects on electricity and magnetism. And again, students will have a bunch of different options of mastery assignments to choose from, and they'll videotape themselves building a device that demonstrates that they really understand how to maybe create an electromagnet, and they can maybe pick up a paper clip with their electromagnet. Pretty cool stuff. So that's what we've been doing in science. You can tell I get really excited about this because this is awesome. I get excited about it. To transition, switch gears, the background has changed. We're talking about COVID. I want to give a quick update for you all on Morning Coffee as it relates to COVID and the vaccine. I know that there's some new information, variants, since I did this for staff. And so I've included some old and some new stuff. So I want to make sure that I get through some of this. This is from the Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. We are in a spot right here where the vaccine is very limited in its availability. I was part of a ECHO thing from the state on Thursday that said, teachers, we are frontline workers, but we are tier 4 unless we are fall into one of the other categories of being a school nurse or administering meds or feeding students or diapering students, or having some of those more personalized instruction interactions with students, or if we're over 65, something like that. So we're right here, and most of the general population is going to be more over on the right side here as compared to where we are. But let's check it out. The vaccine is an mRNA vaccine, which stands for messenger ribonucleic acid. That's a mouthful, so we call it mRNA because that's a lot easier to say. mRNA is really the blueprints your cells need to build proteins. So we all know DNA, but DNA is like locked in this ivory tower in the nucleus, and it can't leave, and so it has to send these messages, which is why we call it messenger RNA. And the messenger RNA is used to build proteins, and those proteins perform functions that are essential and critical to life. They sustain life. And so the vaccines that are developed, Pfizer, Moderna, they're all mRNA vaccines. And those are the ones that up to this point had about 95% of positive, we prevent COVID. And I'll get into that with the variants as well. But I wanted to talk about an mRNA, what it is first. So here's our DNA in the nucleus. We copy it to mRNA because we only need one special part of that. And we use that to build these proteins, whatever they are. They could be on the outside of the cell. They could be on the inside of the cell. They could be something that's sent out as a messenger to another cell somewhere else in the body. But they're used for a variety of purposes. And so in a nutshell, basically that's what mRNA is. It's instructions that are sent from headquarters to the factory about what to build. All right. So what is an mRNA vaccine then? So this is a new type of vaccine, and it uses our own biology to basically make us immune to the virus. And so what this does is that the scientists have found a spike protein. You've probably heard that word, the spike protein, which is one of those proteins that is built, it's put on the outside of the virus, and your cells can build that spike protein and present that. It's important to note that the spike protein itself is harmless. You cannot get sick from it. But once your cells begin building that spike protein, your immune system will recognize it as foreign. And if it's foreign, your immune system will mount a response to develop immunity from that. So really what we're saying here to develop a vaccine is that we take just a little bit of that mRNA. It's not infectious. It's not anything that is going to cause you to get sick. And we teach your cells, hey, we're educators, we teach our immune system to respond to that specific viral protein, and that is the what's in the vaccine. And that's also why it's really hard to store some of these. They have to be stored at super cold temperatures or things like that, because mRNA degrades pretty quickly. It breaks down. It's not stable. In fact, mRNA is under attack as soon as it leaves the nucleus of your cell. So any mRNA, even your own, is going to be degraded very quickly. And so there's not a long shelf life for these things, which is why you'll see things about, yeah, we need, once they're come out of the freezer, we got to get them into people because they will degrade. All right, cool. What I'd like to talk about next is the safety and efficacy and side effects of these things. So yes, these things are safe. They have been through all of the clinical trials that are important to do when you're developing a new vaccine. There are side effects with any vaccine. Yeah, you just introduce something into the arm, so there's going to be that pain of having a needle stuck into your arm. That's par for the course. Other side effects, fever, chills, muscle aches, that's a sign that the vaccine is working. Your body is mounting an immune response, and you want that. You want that response. If nothing happened, then the vaccine wouldn't really be working. Your body wouldn't be learning anything. It wouldn't be learning how to defend itself. And so you want at least a little bit of that response. It varies person to person. Generally, elderly people do not have a strong immune response, and so they may not have as much of a response to the vaccine. Younger, healthier people with a stronger immune system are going to respond much more readily, much more rapidly, and may feel pretty crummy for a day, and then it goes away. So yes, the vaccines are safe. The vaccines basically result in your protection. And that's, I think, the most important thing to know. They will prevent you from dying. And I think that's the key point here. Okay. So if we go through the steps here, vaccine.
That's a good key point, Mr. Holsopple. That'll prevent us from dying. I think that's a pretty important point.
It is, and I'm going to show you the statistics behind that. If you don't just want to believe me, I can show you the statistics. As a mathematical, logical person, scientist, I geek out on some of that statistics, and I can show you those. I have those ready for you. But here's the vaccine. We administer that. The cells now have the blueprints to build the spike protein. The cells present that harmless spike protein. Your immune system learns to recognize it, and now you're protected. All right. So what's going on with all these variants? That's sort of what's the new stuff in the news. And I noticed Miss Goodman was here for a brief while, 8th grade science teacher, and covers evolution. So here's a primer on evolution. In a population of viruses, there's going to be variation. There's going to be there's no population that's exactly the same. And that's just true for any living thing, not just viruses. And so what we have is this tremendous variation. Every time a virus copies its DNA, it gets changed. There's mistakes. It's like you reading a book and you read the same line again. Oops, I made that mistake. Oftentimes that's no big deal. You go back and you read into the next line, but it creates variation when you're copying all of this DNA billions of times. And so the variations, some of them are going to be more virulent, and they cause people to get more sick, and they have less chance of transmission if you are bedridden, you're not around people. But what we have found with viruses over time is that there is a selection pressure to evolve less virulence, because it's easier to transmit a virus if you're out and amongst other people that could pick up the virus. And so what we've seen over time with a lot of different diseases, viral diseases, bacterial diseases, is that they evolve to cohabit with us. And that's probably where we got our gut bacteria from. We have these variations, they make us sick, but if they kill us, they don't get passed on. And so there's this evolutionary pressure, the selection pressure to evolve less virulence. And that's probably where we're going to end up with this virus. We just have a few bumps in the road before we can get there. And it's probably going to be a game of whack-a-mole where we have all these new variants that we have to do a new mRNA flu shot every year or mRNA shot just to counteract some of those variants. But that's just my guess for what is happening in the future. But let's talk about the variants themselves. Let's go back in time to January 2020. Remember January 2020? We were all blissfully going about our lives, eating in restaurants, cramming into elevators, going to work, dancing at house parties. I know Ms. Colderman was doing that a lot. You know, we were living our lives, living our best lives. Back then, the virus looked like this. Now, I'm a Lego, my kids love Legos, and so here's the virus in a Lego format. So you see these little knobbies here. Think about those as Legos, all right? The virus is basically a ball with spikes on the surface poking out. Now, the virus has to get into our cells in order to infect us, and our cells aren't stupid. They don't just let any virus inside willy-nilly. That doesn't make sense. So cells go to great lengths to keep those intruders out. For anything to enter, the intruder has to figure out a way for the spike to bind to another spike on the cell surface. And that's sort of what we think happened in sometime around 2019, and probably in China. The SARS-CoV-2 figured out a way to interact specifically with a spike on the surface of human cells called Ace2. And that interaction wasn't perfect, but this is sort of how it looks. We have a Lego here. It sort of fits with this spike protein, and it sort of grabs on, it goes in. But the binding isn't good enough to really do a whole lot. It doesn't necessarily trick the ACE receptor, but it's enough to trick it into letting a few of these viruses into the cell, which causes this disease. Oh, big mistake. With that one mistake, ACE2 pretty much gave the cell a death sentence and the world a pandemic. And once the virus is inside, it made a bunch of copies of itself, busted the cell wide open, released new virus particles inside the blood, which then went out and found other cells and yada, 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 pandemic. Great. Wonderful, except not. So what's our body doing? During that time, the body isn't just standing by idly letting this attack occur. Oh, no. Your immune system is doing its job. The immune system is preparing a counterattack. In particular, it's manufacturing antibodies. So what's an antibody? Well, if we go back to our Lego definition here, if we use those Legos, you know those lights that you can put on, they don't have anything else on them, but they can bind to the spike protein and sort of neutralize it. The spike protein can't bind to anything else. And so it basically shuts down the virus. It caps the protein. And goodbye, entry into the cell. Goodbye, handshake that the spike protein has with the ACE receptor. Problem solved. Great, wonderful. And that's pretty much how the coronavirus infections played out for 9 months, from January until about September of 2020. Then the virus got crafty. And the pandemic began a new phase. And so that's where we get the mutations, the variants, that kind of stuff. And one of those variants has a mutation in the spike protein itself, and it looks more maybe like this. And now we have a different Lego piece as a spike protein instead of that one. So you have to think about it that every time the virus copies itself, it has the chance of mutating. And so the more often it copies, the more chance for that mistake to occur. And every so often, the virus happens upon a set of mutations that actually help the virus. And that's what this sort of looks like. So the mutation creates a better fit. It looks like this. Oh, hey, here's ACE2, here's the spike protein, and you can see that that's a better fit, which the result is the person's cells get infected more easily, or more cells let the virus inside. We don't really know why, but the person may make more virus particles inside their nose or upper respiratory system when they sneeze, cough, or, talk, chew, eat, spew particles. They expel more virus, and that's likely why the new variants are more contagious. But wait, aren't antibodies going to come save us again? Yes and no. Yes and no. in science, it depends greatly. So turns out variants from South Africa and Brazil, the mutations changed the shape of the virus's spike in a way that's double trouble for the cell. The new shape that helps the virus bind more tightly also prevents antibodies from sticking to the spike. So some antibodies no longer fit well to the end of the spike, so they can't form little caps, and then the virus is free to bind to ACE2. So we have, these antibodies can bind somewhat, but not entirely, so the spike is free to easily access and bind to ACE2. But that's not the whole story. Antibodies are a diverse crew. There's a lot of different antibodies. There's not just this one. There's a ton of them. And your body's not going to go down without a fight. So hopefully the antibodies that are here are going to slow down the viral infection enough that the rest of the antibodies can come through and pick up the slack and still get the job done, or at least stall the infection long enough so the body can make new antibodies that fit perfectly with that mutated spike. Now, Mr. McKelkey asked about preventing death in the statistics. So here are efficacy for all of the different kinds of vaccines. And I want to direct your attention to this number over here on the right. Keep an eye over on the right-hand side. And I want to point out that these vaccines, while they may not prevent severe infection, they do prevent death. There is 0 deaths reported. Okay, so what about the Moderna one? Again, 0 deaths due to COVID. Okay, so what about this, the AstraZeneca one? Well, you can see that it doesn't necessarily prevent infection, but you don't die. There are 0 deaths, 0. Okay, what about the Novavax? And particularly its efficacy against the South African or the UK variant. Yeah, it may not necessarily prevent infection, but are there any deaths? 0. There are 0 deaths. Johnson & Johnson, are there any deaths? Not a one. So here's the Russian one. Are there any deaths? Not related to COVID. So there are some deaths that happened in the study trial, but they were not related to COVID. It was related to other things like fracture of the thoracic vertebrae. It's not related to COVID, but no COVID-related deaths. And I think that's important. So how do I summarize all of this? It doesn't really matter what the shot is. It will prevent you from dying. 100% prevention from dying. That's just the facts. That's just the statistics. So if someone asks you, what shot should I get? Does it matter? No, it really doesn't, because it's going to, any of them are going to prevent you from dying, even against some of those variants, And I think that's what we have to keep at the forefront of our mind, is that we really do want to prevent death. We do want to keep ourselves safe. We don't want to die. At least I don't want to die. And so I am looking at the data and feel pretty strongly that these things are safe and efficacious, even against the variants that are out there. There are a few websites, but for the sake of time, I know Mr. McKelkey, I've talked a lot, so I'm going to go on to this part right here. I don't know if we have a whole lot of time for questions and answers, but I'll put that out there, and I'm going to stop talking.
That's fine, Mr. Holsopple. This is extremely informative, and I think we will put this out, the link to this YouTube feed, out to our families who may want to go back and watch this later and catch up on this information. So we will take some time to see if anyone has questions for you before we wrap up. You can ask your questions in the chat. You can raise your hand, wave at us. Right. If there are questions, just jump in. I'm gonna keep moving while we're waiting to see if there are any questions. So thank you, Mr. Holsopple and Mr. Beer, for filling us in on all the awesome things happening in 7th grade math and science. And then a huge thanks, Mr. Holsopple, to that presentation and that information. I learned a lot. I know I learned a lot from listening to you today, and I'm going to go back and watch that again later too, just to make sure I have all that information straight. So that was really, really helpful and informative, and we really appreciate that. Mrs. Beyondich, before we wrap up, do you want to give us an update on the nonprofit arm of STrEAM Academy?
Just a quick reminder that easy ways to support our school are by making us your Amazon Smile donation. It's under STrEAM Anchorage. You can also connect your Fred Meyer Community Rewards card by logging on to your Community Rewards program through Fred Meyer and adding us. And March 28th, Pitas for a Purpose. Buy a pita at any pita pit or a pita bowl at any pita pit in Anchorage, and 10% of the proceeds go to STrEAM Anchorage to support our cross-country program.
Speaking of our cross-country program, I know I'm going to be at Pita Pit that day, spending my money there. Mr. Mosen, Coach, make sure everyone out there in the ski community knows to eat at Pita Pit on March 28th, okay? Real quick, Coach, where is Ski Club meeting and what time today?
I sent out the remind after I was taught how to use it by our staff, and everybody knows that it is at 3 o'clock at the Campbell Airstrip Trailhead. And the reason I know everyone knows is because everyone showed up last Wednesday, so I'm pretty sure, but they're welcome to call me if they have any questions.
Thanks, Coach. 3 o'clock, Campbell Airstrip Trailhead. Ski Club meeting today. That's awesome. Thank you, Coach Mosen. Coach, just so you know, even though I was tired and it was really cold, when I got home last night, I went and got about 3.5 miles in running. So staying up on it. All right, last plug for today. The online lottery is open. We have seats available, mostly in 6th and 7th grade. Wouldn't hurt to put your application in for 8th grade. If you really want to attend STrEAM your last year, a seat might open up. Seats are open. Online lottery closes on March 18th, and we have some time to make adjustments and balance the lottery out. And then notifications will go out on March 26th. The number one way folks learn about and come to STrEAM Academy is word of mouth. Spread the good word. Tell people about STrEAM. Tell them about your experiences. Mrs. Beyondich has been collecting testimonials from people who want to share their thoughts about STrEAM and their experiences. Please reach out to Ms. Beyondich, call her, email her if you'd like to share a testimonial. She's been posting and sharing those, and they're really powerful. They're always really awesome for me to hear and to read people's experiences with STrEAM. So we're customer service oriented. We're here to serve our families, and we're really proud that we dedicate ourselves to making an incredible learning experience for our students and our families. That's it for morning coffee today. I appreciate everyone being here with us. Mr. Holsapple and Mr. B, once again, thank you so much for coming on and presenting. Mr. Holsapple, thank you again for the extra presentation on COVID-19 vaccines, educating our community, educating our parents. As a science teacher, it's a perfect role for you to continue to educate everyone on the science of virus and the vaccine. It's pretty cool. We're going to wrap up today. Morning coffee. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for those who logged in today. There are several things we didn't get to, and we'll get to them next week. Ms. Kotelman will be ready for an assessment update, educating you more on assessment. We'll talk about the school climate connectedness survey. We'll continue to talk about your 4th quarter options. We'll be back next Wednesday. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye.